But when Beecher was fighting for the abolition of slavery, people threatened to kill him. Plymouth was the great northern depot of the Underground Railroad. People looking for freedom were hidden in the basement beneath us. That wasn't popular with Wall Street, so angry people threatened to burn the church down. Abraham Lincoln came to Plymouth twice. The first time it was political. He sat on the fourth row with a wealthy business person. But 2 weeks later he came and no one recognized Lincoln. And so he ended up sitting in the balcony. Presumably he came the second time not looking for votes, but to pray for peace. Lincoln may be our most admired president now, but he was murdered for what he believed. After the Civil War, Plymouth kept looking for ways to be more unpopular. The church sent money to Chinese immigrants on the West Coast who were discriminated against. Defending immigrants is a quick way to become unpopular. Plymouth encouraged women to speak out and argued for their rights. Defending the right to vote continues to be unpopular. In the early 1900s, John Arbuckle, the coffee baron who began the tradition of Brooklyn being over-caffeinated, built the Plymouth Institute, which is now our church house, to help immigrants get an education that would keep them out of the sweatshops. This made Plymouth wildly unpopular with the owners of sweatshops. In 1945, Branch Rickey, a member of Plymouth and general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers, found a brand new way to be unpopular. He invited Jackie Robinson to integrate baseball. In 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. preached an early version of his I Have a Dream speech here at Plymouth. King was assassinated for his dream of peace. We have a long list of unpopular people who've been in our building. Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony, Hillary Clinton, Sonia Sotomayor, Colin Kaepernick, Adam Sandler, and Plymouth is still looking for ways to be unpopular. We're active in anti-human trafficking, today's slavery. We have a racial justice ministry that sponsors events like discussions on how to talk to children about racism. We deliver food once a month to the Lower East Side. We host a shelter for the homeless 5 weeks a year in this room. And not everyone loves these ministries. After Plymouth hosted Brooklyn for Peace last year, I was so impressed that I joined your group just to make sure that I don't become popular. We admire your willingness to engage in peacemaking because we know it's hard. On behalf of Plymouth Church, thank you for what you're doing, the unpopular work of making peace.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Brett Younger. That's very inspiring to know that we are so unpopular that we're, like in jazz we say, you're so outside, you're inside. So now I'd like to welcome to the podium BFP's co-founder and my fellow board member, Ms. Rusty Eisenberg.
Adjust my microphone. Okay, I can't see my script, so who knows what will happen. I love this event, actually, because it's a chance to see lots of old friends and people that I've worked with over many years and just my friends. And it's also a time to meet new people and make new friends. So it's a really lovely occasion for that. And if I could just mention a personal note, this is my last day I teach college, and it was my last day of the semester. Not a single person here has asked me for an extension on a paper. And so that, I consider that phenomenal. Now in your program, there's a list of all the activities that Brooklyn for Peace has done over this past year. So I'm gonna spare you the whole list. We've done a lot. We'd like to do more. But you can all read about it, and I think if you didn't know that we were doing important work, you wouldn't be here. So I'm going to skip that. But I thought that what I want to just mention very briefly are two themes that are very important to us, have always been important, but in a new way. Or, I don't know, themes, goals, I don't know what you would call it. So one of our goals, which is longstanding, is to be a force in the community that is constantly raising issues of peace and war and U.S. militarism and the need to settle international conflicts in a nonviolent way. And we've done that all along. In the present context, it actually is like even more important, I think, partly because we're in a very odd period where it's like the country is in a period of sort of denial or amnesia about all these wars that we've been in, including the ones that are still going on. Today was my last class, and I think I mentioned that already. And I asked my students in class, apart from the assigned reading, right? I asked them, how many of them had ever heard about Abu Ghraib? How many had ever heard of it? 2 people raised their hands. It was out of 35. One of them was an ROTC student who is learning about Abu Ghraib as a good idea for things not to do. And the other is a veteran of the war in both Afghanistan and Iraq, and he knew all about it, and nobody else had ever heard of it. And I think it's symptomatic of the way in which we have gone into this new period where the history is being buried, and not just the history, but the fact that the United States is still involved in wars is still really being, avoided. And I think accompanying that, which is a genuine problem, is that so many things are happening domestically that are terrible, right? I mean, there's a crisis a minute. And so it's also very difficult to get issues of war and peace on a kind of national agenda. I mean, some of you may have seen a letter that peace folks wrote to Bernie Sanders encouraging him to mention issues of war and peace more than he's done in the past. But again, I mean, that's partly happening because there's so many changes that are, in terms of what's happening in immigration, in terms of what's happening in climate change, these are all very, very grave things. And so it's been very easy for the issue of war and peace to be marginalized, but our group considers it of great importance, whether you're looking at what's happening in Yemen and the catastrophe there, the tremendous ongoing danger of war with Iran, with this lunatic that's National Security Advisor, it makes you want Flynn to come back. With the possible, Cold War, I mean, we talk about the Russian scandal, but one of the things that's clearly happened is we're going into a new Cold War period, a new nuclear arms race, a scrapping of the INF Treaty. I mean, there's a whole host of issues, and we are very committed in Brooklyn for Peace for continuing to raise those issues. At the same time as we have that commitment, we also have a commitment to work with folks in coalition, to work on a broad range of issues, and to work with a host of organizations that are concerned with other issues. And we've always felt that way. I think the importance of it now is even clearer. Not only because issues of social justice and peace are integrally tied with each other, but also because if we just worry about our issue, like we're upset about Iraq, we're upset about Yemen, we're upset about the administration's policy towards Israel-Palestine, which is beyond abysmal. All right, if we're just, what's happening with immigration, if we just stay in those silos and work on our thing, we're going to lose. The issues are integrally tied together, and we need to support one another in the array of efforts that people are involved in. So these two commitments, both to raise issues of war and peace and militarism, but to work in coalition with others, is really central to what our organization has been about for many years, and I would say at the present time, all that seems even more important than ever before. So that's really what is sort of defining our work going forward. This dinner tonight represents that double commitment. And, it costs a lot of money to come to this dinner, right? But the truth is we need everybody, and I want to steal like a line from Make the Road, right? Because as we work on our double commitment to social justice and to peace, it's a work in progress, right? I mean, what is the right strategy? What do we emphasize going forward? How do we collaborate? Nobody in Brooklyn for Peace has magical answers to these questions. This is the challenge of our time, and we're going to make the road. I feel like I'm just plagiarizing like crazy. Right? We're going to make the road going forward and try to figure out what is the best way that we have to be effective. And for that, you know, your money tonight helps. You know that you're going to hear another pitch for money. One thing I can assure you is we don't waste our money. No one has, with your money, you know, no extravagances can be found anywhere. It pays for staff time and for our office and a variety of things. So that's one component of it. But more than your money is we need you. We need people's participation, we need your work, we need your ideas, we need to discuss with you. We aren't a group that has magical solutions, we're a group that reaches out to others and wants to try to figure out the best way forward. So with that, I want to let everybody eat their dinner and to welcome all of you and our guests who are here tonight that we're honoring, who are playing an amazing role. Well, a special welcome to you and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Rusty. So, I noticed how much everybody had been snacking as they were coming in. So, it's appropriate that now we're going to say it's time for dinner, right? Everybody goes, okay, well, I'm not hungry. Well, gotta eat anyway. So, what we're gonna do is we have it set up as a buffet style. And I guess you can, you know, maybe by tables in the back kind of move around and not all at once, of course. And we'll come back to start the program at 8 o'clock. We have a surprise guest that will be arriving, so when she does arrive, we will announce her. But right now, please enjoy.
To Reverend Brett Younger, to Veronica, and to Matt Weinstein, to everyone here in attendance at the PathMakers to Peace Gala. A pleasant good evening to everyone. It's certainly my honor, my privilege to be here with you this evening. And I have to thank Matt for reaching out and extending the invitation to join you this evening. As has been stated, I'm Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke of the 9th District of New York, which is Central Brooklyn. I tell people the best way to describe my district is that it runs from Atlantic Avenue to the Atlantic Ocean and covers all of the communities in between. On the west side of the district is Park Slope, and on the east side of the district is Brownsville. So I have a very diverse constituency, one in which I was born and raised. And so the work that I do on behalf of the people of the 9th Congressional District is truly a labor of love. And it is where the values that encourage me to take bold stances comes from. It comes from a district that is very engaged on every level with every issue that impacts the human condition. And so when you hear me standing up, because I believe it is important for us to engage in a treaty to stop the nuclear development in Iran, it's because I'm concerned about the human condition. When you hear me out there speaking against the U.S. engagement with the Saudis in Yemen, it's because I'm concerned about our human family. When you hear me out there screaming about the need for comprehensive immigration reform and the violence and against the violence that is taking place emanating from the White House these days against immigrants, things like public charge, the public charge rule that is now going through promulgation. And I want to ask, if those of you have not had an opportunity yet, please go to the DHS website or my website and add a public comment against the enactment of public charge, the expansion of the public charge rule, because it will devastate a district like mine. It will devastate communities like ours, and it is important that we stand up for those who don't have a voice amongst us. I want to encourage you in this time because I am extremely encouraged. The 116th Congress in the House of Representatives, I believe, is going to be transformative. When I look, yes. When I look at not only the new colleagues that have come in with all of their energy, with all of their focus, with such a very progressive sentiment behind all that they have done to win their seats, I'm encouraged. I'm also encouraged because there are many of us who've been serving whose voices have not had the amplification due to, of course, Republican rule in the House, the Senate, and the White House. We now have an opportunity to be the wind beneath one another's wings. This is not the time for us to sit back and say, oh yes, the Dems have the House of Representatives. This is the time for us to continue to apply pressure to the causes and issues that we espouse in order to make sure that we come through with the policies that our children and our grandchildren will inherit from us in terms of a better civil society. So I'm really excited. I'm excited that you're gathered to honor such luminaries in our community as PathMakers to peace. And it is important that we continue to celebrate one another's accomplishments, that we continue to have this dialogue and undergird one another. And this is the time of activism for our generation. Let us not get complacent in any way. Because yes, we have taken back the House, but the Senate can do whatever it wants to do. It has the numbers to block anything that we're trying to get accomplished. We know coming out of the gate that we will be looking at voting rights in the United States of America. What took place in Georgia was a travesty. It was robbery right before the American people's eyes. This is unbelievable in America, but it is what it is. We've got to get it right. We've just heard about this seat in North Carolina where they were stealing votes with absentee ballots. These folks have no shame. And they feel as though, they have the ability to circumvent the rule of law. And it is important that we remind them that in a democracy, every vote is treasured. And everyone's vote should be counted, must be counted, in order for us to fortify and grow as a democracy. And so there are just so many battles on so many fronts that we face right now, and I think that our revolution, since I'm before Brooklyn for Peace, is a peaceful resolution. We're going to use our energy organizing together to make sure that we apply the pressure to the legislature in Washington, D.C., to make sure that we produce the diamonds that enable us to live in a nation that has a respect for its own planet, right? We want to deal with climate change. We want to deal with infrastructure investment to move swiftly to renewable energy. We have the ability to do it. The science has already been developed. It is having the will. It is cutting back on tax cuts to the wealthy, getting rid of it, quite frankly. I heard you, and of course, Medicare for all, that is a must. That is a must. But, the Republican Party did everything they could to dismantle the gains that we have made in the civil society. It is now reinventing ourselves. And as I've said, as I've traveled throughout my constituency, we have a unique opportunity in this generation. We're gonna have to rebuild. We're gonna have to rebuild on every front. And I tell people, even with the federal government, when you think about all the damage that is being done in our federal agencies, we're in the midst now of seeing a massive brain drain of career professionals. We're seeing folks who have spent generations working on progressive ideas in the EPA, in the Department of the Interior, and they're being stifled under this administration. Many are choosing to leave, some will be staying. But at the end of the day, as this reign of terror sunsets, I call it the reign of terror, that's 45. As it sunsets, we need to reimagine for ourselves what we have as expectations for this nation, and make sure that we are cultivating the talent, the expertise to go into these agencies, whether it's a State Department that has to deal with all of the struggles that we are seeing before our very eyes, the tragedy that's taking place in Yemen, the tragedy of Syria, the issues of Iraq and Afghanistan. They still reside with us. And let us not forget, in this conversation, the challenge that we're facing right in our own hemisphere with South and Central America. You don't see people leaving their nations because it's simply a matter of just opportunity. There is a serious breakdown in the civil societies of places like Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. There is a lot of violence taking place and people are fleeing for their lives. And it is up to us as a nation to open our doors to refugees. We cannot. As a nation built by immigrants for immigrants, ever forget that this has been a place of refuge for those who have faced persecution, have faced violence for generations. And for us to come to the 21st century and now turn our backs on who we are as a nation would be the worst gift that we could ever bequeath to our children. So I want to ask that we continue to press on comprehensive immigration reform, that we continue to bear in mind that we are a nation for asylum seekers, and that we demand that the Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, and all of the appropriate agencies do right by these families that are on our border. Will you be there with me?
Yes.
We can't be about peace and then turn a blind eye to the tragedy that is unfolding within our own hemisphere. We have to be solution-oriented. We have to open our hearts, and then we have to demand that the State Department do what it can do to help these nations to get their civil society in a growth mode, to get their communities in a place where violence is no longer a means for people's survival. And so I'm just going to close by saying that out of sight is not out of mind. You all are truly the wind beneath my wings. It is the energy, the organizing, the information that you share with me that enables me to do the work that I do in Washington, D.C. on your behalf. I want to thank each and every one of you for your encouragement and your support, your engagement most of all. This is our time, and when we finish the work that we must do, our children and grandchildren will look into our eyes and say, when they elected 45, you did right by me. You stood up, you fought back, and now I've inherited from you a nation much greater than the one that you inherited. So everyone, thank you once again for being supportive. And thank you for extending the invitation. And I also believe I just saw my colleague, my mentor, one of the baddest ladies on Capitol Hill, the Congress lady from the Lower East Side, Williamsburg, and Queens, the Honorable Nydia Velasquez, the next chairwoman. The next chairwoman of the Committee on Small Business in the United States House of Representatives.
Okay, and we're going to ask Ms. Velasquez to come up in a little bit. We wanted to kind of get on track with our program. I know those of you who know me know how hard I am about that. So much so that there's some running jokes about it. So, anyway, to get going, and just pay no attention to the people behind the curtain, which is what it is in The Wizard of Oz. Our first honoree tonight is actually a group, okay? And that group is called Make the Road New York, MRNY. Make the Road New York is a grassroots social justice organization working to build the power of immigrant and working class communities to achieve dignity and justice. It has 23,000 plus members across New York City, Long Island, and Westchester County who lead multiple organizing committees. MRNY, for short, is built on the principle, and I think this is very profound, that every person has expertise and wisdom and deserves to exercise real power, creativity, and leadership in their lives, regardless of immigration status, race, or gender identity. MRNY cultivates networks which offer safety and support and solidarity. Receiving the award tonight on behalf of the organization, and I'm going to go grab the award. Okay, so receiving the award on behalf of the organization is Associate Development Director Chloe Tribich.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here in this amazing room. I feel like the energy and the kind of passion here, and also among the people here, but also in this space, just like you can really feel it. So for Make the Road, and for I think many other activists and organizers in the city, Brooklyn for Peace is an amazing example of what it means to be a rock of resistance, and to just do the hard work of organizing for peace and resisting oppression day after day and year after year. Whether that's challenging our New York senators on Yemen, or just making ways for regular people in Brooklyn to be involved, to write a letter, to make a call, or to just plug into a bigger movement. I think Brooklyn for Peace is leading the way on that. And Make the Road especially, we've been incredibly grateful to be in the streets with all of you and to be able to work with your organization, and especially in this time when we're resisting this tremendous escalation of anti-immigrant policies and attacks on communities throughout New York. And I think more than ever now, it's shown the need for us to work together and the clear connections between Make the Road's work and the work of Brooklyn for Peace, the Poor People's Campaign, and Jewish Voice for Peace, and I'm sure many other organizations that are represented in this room. It's shown the connections between the United States intervention abroad in Central America, touching on some of the issues that Congresswoman Clark raised, and the racism that's unleashed against immigrants in the United States, between poverty here and xenophobia, between Islamophobia and US policies and towards Israel and Palestine. And for us at Make the Road, it's felt a lot lately that like every day is a new attack, whether it's the attacks on DACA and other forms of immigration relief, the new public charge proposal. But one tremendous constant source of strength has been the allies that have come out in the street day after day and really stood with us. And many of you in this room have done that. Brooklyn for Peace has done that. Congresswoman Clark, Velasquez have been huge allies of Make the Road, as well as Jewish Voice for Peace and the Poor People's Campaign. So again, I just want to say I'm tremendously honored to be here tonight. I'm really excited about 2019. I feel like there's possibilities for us to make things happen together in Albany, locally, and to build our movement across the country. So thank you so much to all of you at Brooklyn for Peace. I'm so happy to be here.
Already introduced this. Thank you so much.
Where is she? I'm going to take 1 second. Okay. We're now very pressed for time, but we're also very, very fortunate in having another guest who's worked with us over many, many years, who has been a tremendous ally for us for the cause of peace, whether it's in Iraq or Afghanistan, or a treaty with Iran. And I understand now that Nydia Velasquez, why am I not seeing you? You're here, okay. So we have worked with her for many, many years, and as Yvette Clark said earlier, this is the big moment for Congress. This is the time, this is serious, right? We are counting on you guys to put the brakes on what we're dealing with right now. You've been an ally of ours for many, many years. We're delighted to welcome you. Thank you very much, Nydia Velasquez.
Thank you, Rosie, for that warm introduction. It is great to be here with Yvette Clark, my partner in crime in Washington. It's a thrill to be here and to know that we are in the brink of bringing change in Washington. And it is because of the work that organizations, you have been relentless. You have been in the forefront of fighting for peace, justice, a more equitable society. And 2 years ago, when we were stoned, the next day I didn't want to get up. I just could not believe what happened. And my reaction was, how did we get here? And then it came that day, that morning, when I was getting dressed to go to Chinatown to celebrate the Chinese New Lunar Year. And I got a phone call from Make the Road telling me that they needed me at JFK. And I said, no, but I have to go to Chinatown. And the people on the other phone, on the other end, were just in distress. They said, look, the president issued the Muslim ban and people are being withheld for many hours. I called Jerry Nadler, not knowing if anyone contacted him, but knowing that he sits on judiciary and that these agencies, Customs and Border Patrol, fall under the jurisdiction of Homeland Security and Judiciary. I called Jerry Nadler and he told me he was on his way to JFK. I went and we dealt with the situation. That day was an agonizing day for so many Americans. And I have to say that I have never been prouder of the American people. They just came to JFK to demonstrate, to demand the release of these people, and to fight for the values that we hold so dear. That is what America is all about. And so now we are in the majority because of the work of so many grassroots organizations. I said, as well as Yvette Clarke, every time we were approached with another policy being issued by the president by executive order, because he knew that he didn't have the support in Congress. But we always said to our constituents, we know that you're agonizing, but I don't want for you to agonize. We need to organize. We have to rally. We have to demonstrate. We have to fight for our democratic institutions. So, and we have been here so many times. I remember after 9/11, being a member from New York. Do you know how many calls and the pressure that we faced in supporting a war resolution, which I opposed? Yes. Or to support the Patriot Act, that was a wish list of the CIA and intel agencies, eroding civil rights and civil liberties in our country. Only 4 members from New York. Being from New York and opposing the Patriot Act took a lot of courage. And in so many ways, I resent the fact that the Republican majority had abdicated their constitutional responsibility. And because of you, we're gonna go back in 2019, and I will be the first one, together with Yvette Clarke, reminding our democratic leadership that we must be bold, that we must be courageous, that we need to put forward a legislative agenda that tackles the real issues of our nation. We got to strengthen the Affordable Care Act. We got to send a strong message that they cannot hold dreamers hostage for a stupid wall. I'm proud that because of the great collective effort in our nation, we won in red districts where we never had a chance. You know why? Because when it comes to Affordable Care Act, when it comes to access to quality health care, those are not Republican or Democratic issues. Those are human issues. And we did what we needed to do. Go into those 1,500 red districts and talk to the people and say, what we need is not to cut taxes for the very wealthy in this country. What we need is to invest in infrastructure so that we create the jobs that we need and that we rebuild America. That we must, as the richest, most powerful country in the world, address the issue of economic injustice in this country. We need to reduce the inequality that exists in our country. And we must address the issue of climate change. We must reduce carbon emissions. We must hold polluters accountable, and we must invest in green infrastructure. That is the future of this country, and that is what we need to do. We gotta show leadership. But I do believe in a war. I want a war against poverty, a war against discrimination and racism. In the richest country in the world, how could we allow for any child to go to bed hungry? That is not who we are. We must respect the diversity of our country. That is what made this country great. It's nothing else. We have always been great because this country has been a beacon of hope. So I promise to you, we have a lot of challenges, but we have great opportunities. We must be bold, we must be courageous, and we'll be there fighting and being the voices of the voiceless in this country. God bless you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right, you guys got 10 seconds. I'm very bossy because I respect everybody who's in this room. Some people got to get up early in the morning. Some people got to take care of their kids. And I'm one of those that have to get up at 4. So it's a wonderful opportunity, but we should also honor everyone that's here. So, our next honoree, Rebecca Vilkomerson has been a member of Jewish Voices for Peace since 2001, when it was a non-staff organization meeting in people's living rooms, which sounds familiar to us, and have been executive director since 2009. In her nearly 10 years leading JVP, it has gone from an organization of 4 staff and just a few hundred members to a powerhouse with over 30 staff, about 16,000 members, and over 70 chapters around the country. That's very impressive. It's very impressive in talking about grassroots organizing and people being out there and building. In 2010, she was named one of the 50 most influential Jewish American leaders by The Forward, and in 2017, the Jerusalem Post named her one of the 50 most influential Jewish leaders worldwide. She has appeared in outlets including The Washington Post, LA Times, Democracy Now!, MSNBC, and Haaretz. She has a bachelor's degree from Connecticut College and a master's from Johns Hopkins University. She lives with her husband, 2 daughters, and a dog in South Park Slope. Please. On behalf of Brooklyn for Peace, we present to Rebecca Vilkomerson our 2018 PathMakers to Peace Award.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so honored. Thank you to Brooklyn for Peace for this incredible honor, and especially I want to mention that so many JVP members are also Brooklyn for Peace members, and so I wanted to especially acknowledge the Palestine Solidarity Committee, which is seated over here, many of my friends and comrades here. And I also wanted to thank Representative Clark and Representative Velasquez. Representative Velasquez is my representative, and the last time I saw you was at the parking lot at JFK protesting against a Muslim ban, and it was incredibly meaningful for us that you were there, so thank you so much for representing us. And I also just feel so honored to be sharing this award with Liz Theoharis from the Poor People's Campaign and with my friends from Make the Road, New York, who were also there that day at JFK. I've admired your work individually and organizationally for such a long time, and so it feels really great to be sharing this honor together. And you know, we focus on different issues, and Brooklyn for Peace, one of the parts of the magic of Brooklyn for Peace is that it brings all these issues together, but in this, I really believe that we are in the same fight. We're all fighting for fairness, for justice, and for human dignity. And we're doing it in different ways, but we're doing it together, and we're all ultimately fighting for the same thing, so it's very beautiful to be able to share this with you. And I really am an organizer at heart, so before I really get into what I want to say, I do want to put in one plug, which is that the JVP New York City chapter is having its biggest action of the year. We're going to be lighting the People's Menorah on Monday night, 6:30, the New Church of Manhattan, so jvpnewyork.org. We'd love it if you could come. So, I've lived in Brooklyn, as it was already mentioned, for almost 10 years. I consider myself a lifer. And so you know, it's especially thrilling to be honored on my home turf. And a couple of the things that I love so much about Brooklyn for Peace is that you're rooted in this place in Brooklyn, and you do all your work in the context of our communities right here. And I also love that you have your principles and you stick to them and you don't bend with the breeze or go with what's easier. As Reverend Brett said at the very beginning, sometimes you have to be unpopular in order to do the right thing. And I think that's what Brooklyn for Peace has always done and will always continue to do. And you're fighting for a vision of a peaceful future for all of our children and for all people, and you don't compromise on that. And that feels pretty familiar, to be honest, because that's the work that we also do at Jewish Voice for Peace. And I don't think it's actually unconnected, that this is actually the first time that I've received an honor like this for my work. So it means a lot. And with no undue modesty, I do think the work of Jewish Voice for Peace deserves to be celebrated. Yes. And I will say that one of the nice things about being the executive director of an organization is you get to take credit for the work a lot of other people do. You also get a lot of grief for things that other people do, so I guess that's fair. But I don't think it's surprising that it takes a group like Brooklyn for Peace to recognize the work of JVP, besides the fact that we share the word peace in our name, because of those values that we share. We're working within our communities and we're sticking with our vision and our values even when it's hard. So in that context, I want to talk just a little bit tonight about what sticking to our principles looks like this week, just this specific week for us at Jewish Voice for Peace. And as some of you may have heard, Professor Mark Lamont Hill, who is tenured at Temple University in Philadelphia and is one of the few truly progressive voices on a range of issues who appears on CNN, was summarily fired last week after he gave a speech at the UN in solidarity with the Palestinian struggle for freedom. Dr. Hill is very well steeped in the situation in Israel and Palestine. He's traveled there himself. And as is his wont, his speech was imbued with recognizing the humanity of all people, is Jewish and Palestinian. His final words were what ended up getting him in trouble when he urged international action that, quote, will give us what justice requires, a free Palestine from the river to the sea. We're going to return to that phrase in a minute. So we thought it was appalling and dangerous for the public conversation about Israel-Palestine when Professor Hill was fired. So JVP rushed into action. We raised money for an ad that's going to be running in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. It's going to be seen by over 900,000 people in his support. And that's where CNN is headquartered. And our Philly chapter is out on the streets, and our rabbis have been running interference at Temple, so we're going all out to support him. From our perspective, the vitriol and the accusations of anti-Semitism hurled at Professor Hill and CNN giving into them are clearly not only free speech issues, especially if you look at some of the opinions of some of the other CNN contributors who are allowed to keep their jobs, but it's an issue of whose voices, whose perspectives, and whose political parameters are allowed to be heard in the public conversation. And it was very clear from his speech that while Professor Hill's comments expressed critique of Israel as a state, he intended no harm to Jews or to Israelis. But I wanted to share a story because yesterday, one of our major donors at JVP, someone who is quite committed to our work and gives us a substantial amount of money every year, so he wrote me with great concern, saying that JVP had gone too far this time. And that's something I can't dismiss. I know how truly committed he is to justice in Israel-Palestine, but I was also truly surprised and shocked by his doubts. So it was a good reminder of how much work we have to do in our community, and in our case that's in the Jewish community, or communities I should say. And it was also a good time for me to practice how to do that hard work of sticking to our political principles while being respectful of the genuine fears that the phrase "from the river to the sea" brings up in some people. And knowing that this is our work specifically as a Jewish organization to engage in these conversations so others don't have to, and also to provide a place where people can really examine their emotions and reactions and why they have them and to grapple with them. We do have to grapple with what it means that a cry for freedom sounds to some of our people like a cry for genocide. These conversations are hard, I'm not gonna lie. My parents are here and I don't know how they're gonna take this. But again, it's important to engage in them. That's the hard work of organizing and the hard work of educating and the hard work of talking and the hard work of doing. So I sent this donor a whole collection of articles by a slew of Palestinian authors who wrote all in the last 72 hours or so about for how them, the river to the sea is a call for equality, for rights, for freedom, for a dignified life, about the racism and Islamophobia that is underneath the assumption that full equality and human rights for all could be something that is an attack on Jewish people. I wanted to honor his feelings and share with him that I didn't always feel comfortable myself with From the River to the Sea, but that I knew that if he could move beyond his instinctive fears and what he'd been taught, he might see differently. And that seeking justice often requires an expansion of our understanding of who our community is and who we're responsible for and who we're responsible to. And I think because we're all organizers in this room and we all have to believe in people's capacity to change. And though I feel somewhat disheartened that what is being done to Mark Lamont Hill right now shows how far we have to go still to move the mainstream conversation about Israel-Palestine, even with how far it has already moved, and it has moved very far. There are a lot of victories I could have spoken about instead of talking about this difficult conversation. I also feel excited about the opportunity it brings to challenge my own community to think about our language and our assumptions and our history and our actions. And I think that's at the core of all kinds of social justice work. The work that you all are doing every day, the work that we all are doing every day. It's often hard, it's so hard, and it can be so lonely, and it can be so uncomfortable. But being uncomfortable and being brave and digging in deep and sticking with it and standing up for what's right is also essential to what we do. So I wish I had a neat end to this story. Mark Lamont Hill still does not have his job back. I don't know if our donor is going to keep giving to us. And I definitely don't know if the Jewish community, or communities I should say, are going to overcome their fears and tribalism enough to seek justice. But I do know that we're all going to stick with it, and we're going to keep going. And I feel incredibly, incredibly grateful and lucky that we all get to do it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Congratulations to Governor. So that's our beautiful, I guess you would call it, like, poster was designed by Andrew. I don't know Andrew's last name, Andrew. Bunch? Andrew Bunch. Beautiful. He did an amazing job. It makes us look very professional, right? We look like, and so this is our photo op section, you know? You know, like when you go to walk the carpet, they have the photo op section. But anyway, let's move on because we have, congratulations. So, how is everybody? You guys ready? You're still up? I mean, the coffee time is coming. I know the alcohol maybe have kicked in and you're saying, I wish I had a little caffeine to get me moving. Well, our third honoree this evening is Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, and she's the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, along with the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. She is also co-director of the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice, as well as founder and the coordinator of the Poverty Initiative. She has spent the past 25 years organizing amongst poor and dispossessed in the United States. She has helped to lead significant organizing efforts around the country. Don't you love it? And has worked with and advised grassroots, community-led, anti-poverty organizations to build the movement to end poverty. In 2018, alongside the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II, Theoharis helped to launch the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for morale revival. And this was inspired by the 1968 Poor People's Campaign. She's received a BA in Urban Studies from the University of Pennsylvania, her Master's of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary in 2004, where she was the first William Sloane Coffin Scholar, and her PhD also from Union, where she studied New Testament and Christian origins. Liz is ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church. On behalf of Brooklyn for Peace, we present to Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, as well as Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II, who could not be here, our 2018 PathMakers to Peace Award.
Good evening. I want to thank all of you, Brooklyn's for Peace, and everyone that is here this evening, not for honoring me, but for lifting up and celebrating people, communities, millions of folks who are standing up for justice today. I'm in a room of peacemakers and social justice activists, and I feel very at home. I was raised in a family that believed in peacemaking. We followed the words of Reverend Dr. King, that peace is not just the absence of violence, of tension, it's the presence of justice. We were inspired by the words from the book of Jeremiah, chapters 6 and 8. This is how important it was to that prophet who says, "My people are broken, shattered, and yet they put on Band-Aids, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace, saying it's not so bad, you'll be just fine." But things are not just fine. And so, as I stand before you this evening, there are 140 million poor and low-income people in the United States. But many people are saying, peace, peace, when there is no peace. When 43% of the US population, of all races, creeds, nationalities, religions, lives in or one emergency away from poverty. When a nation that boasts of being the wealthiest one on earth has 51% of our nation's children living in food-insecure homes. When 250,000 people die every year in the United States, and 40,000 people die every day
across the world from poverty. We should have an international outcry. But instead, we hear things are just fine. Peace, peace. When there is no peace. In 2018, in Lowndes County, Alabama, families have raw sewage in their yards. And kids need to use CPAP breathing machines because of the mold in their homes. In Oak Flats, Arizona, native grave sites are being desecrated. Indigenous communities are being pushed out. In Grays Harbor, Washington, homeless encampments of millennials are being attacked by militia groups and by the police. In Flint, Michigan, and in 4 million homes across the country, moms can buy unleaded gas, can buy unleaded paint, but can't provide unleaded water for their children. And I don't need to tell a group of people who are associated with an organization that has been fighting for peace for nearly 40 years that our nation spends 53 cents of every discretionary dollar on the military. We lose more veterans to suicide than to war. We have more than 7 wars going on across the world, and we can't provide health care for everyone in this country or across the world. Because we spend less than 15 cents of every discretionary dollar on health care, education, and anti-poverty programs combined. But we're actually here this evening to celebrate, to appreciate everyone here and the thousands and millions of people across this city, across this state, across this country, across this world who have said, we need peace. We want to struggle for justice. We need to build a movement. And so I would say, we are. Folks with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, we've been traveling around the country for the last couple of years. And from the Bronx to the border, from Appalachia to Aberdeen, from the Deep South to the California coast, it's become increasingly clear that people are ready to come together and demand justice. And this past spring, with many of you involved, tens of thousands of people engaged in, led the largest and most expansive wave of nonviolent civil disobedience in the 21st century and perhaps in US history. People from all races, all genders, all religions, all walks of life, the poor, low-wage workers, advocates, clergy, surged state capitals in more than 42 states and in Washington, D.C. to call attention to the real moral issues of our day. We launched the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we launched with an understanding that to address poverty, that to address justice, that to address peace, we must simultaneously address 5 interlocking injustices: systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, militarism in the war economy, and a distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. So we launched understanding because we've studied history. And in American history, whenever we've faced forces of regression, moral movements have arisen to call us to higher ground. That's what the abolitionists did in the 19th century. It's what the women's suffragists did in the early 20th century. It's what Rosa Parks and Septima Clark and Ella Baker and Anne Braden did with many leaders of every creed and nationality, race, sexuality, gender, to build the civil rights movement. And it's what Martin Luther King, the welfare rights movement, and many, many others called us to in the Poor People's Campaign about 50 years ago. As far back as the Old Testament scripture, the book of Ezekiel teaches that when the poor, when women, when immigrants are being mistreated by politicians, by religious leaders, by larger society, the question is asked, who will stand in the gap? And I'm here to say this evening that America needs moral leadership who will step forward and stand in the gap. In every generation, we've needed a moral fusion movement where people come together through our deepest religious and constitutional moral values to build an agenda, to establish justice, to ensure domestic tranquility, to provide for the common defense, and to promote the general welfare. A moral agenda calling for such ideas as health care for everyone, with no denial for pre-existing conditions, living wages, guaranteed income for the poor, voting rights, an agenda that calls us to ensure labor rights, equal pay for equal work, an end to warmongering, an end to mass incarceration. We need clean water, clean air, equality in education, and even free college and university for everyone who wants it. So I don't need to tell a group of activists that just articulating this agenda or a vision, it's not enough. We also need moral activism. We're required sometimes not just to dissent, but to disrupt the forces of injustice. Not with hate, but with revolutionary love. We must love the United States enough to take a knee and to call this nation to a knee of repentance. We must love America enough to stand between an ICE agent who has been ordered to do wrong and an immigrant neighbor who just wants to do right. We must love these yet-to-be United States enough to show that the same states that attack voting rights are also high poverty states, electing politicians through racist voter suppression that pass policies that impact people of all races, all genders, all sexualities, all immigrant statuses, all ages. And we must love this democracy enough to go to jail in nonviolent civil disobedience for it, to organize in the streets for it, to sue in the courts for it, and to register everybody we know to vote at the ballot box for it. We must step forward and stand in the gap to say things aren't just fine. There is not peace. And so I'm glad that so many of us in this room and in the communities that we're connected to are. So all across the country, people are taking action together. And the year before Dr. King was killed, he announced that it was time for a Poor People's Campaign. He said, "The poor and dispossessed in this nation live in a cruelly unjust society. If they can be helped to take action together, they will do so with a freedom and a power that will be a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life." There is a moral uprising, a new and unsettling force of people who refuse to give up, who refuse to settle and surrender to suffering, a force of people who believe in fusion, who are united by morals, who are pathmakers for peace, who are crying out, somebody is hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Thank you. You all are inspiring.
Beautiful, absolutely. Thank you so much and congratulations. I wanted to make a quick correction. The design of this beautiful backdrop was done by Sarah Sills. So she's done a lot of work for us on our logos and things like that. I'd like to take a moment now because the Domestic Workers United has offered to provide us with a musical interlude, a quick song that they're here to offer us to lift our spirits. And I wanted to introduce Christine Lewis, the cultural director, Diane Brown is the chair, and Sheila McDonald who's the treasurer. And they're going to come and do one song for us before I bring up Tara for closing remarks.
So hi, how is everyone feeling? Let me ask this question again. How is everyone feeling? That's more like it. So on behalf of Domestic Workers United, who got a Bill of Rights passed in 2010 to protect immigrant women of color and women, period, who work in the invisible industries as nannies, caregivers, elder caregivers, and housekeepers. We're here to represent. And I have here with me our chairwoman, Diana Brown. And I have Shaylin Pay, who's our treasurer. Les, thank you. A thread goes through all of what we're doing right now, a thread. And it's a beautiful thing, you know, we see in 2016, 4-5 came into being. And we saw within our community a fear that's not new. It's relatively old. But there was a fear within our immigrant community. But with the community on our side, we will not back down. We're like the bull charging in, and we're going full force ahead with community. And so in this vein, let me just say, it's easy to talk at these plenaries and sit and inculcate words and, you know, and eat food and fall asleep. You know, it's easy to eat food right now and fall asleep, but we're gonna sing, and I'm gonna engage you. And this is one of my favorite songs. So here's what I want you to do. A call and response. And you would sing with the refrain, okay? Yes, definitely. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Listen. Let me hear this more powerful. You had some good food, right? It sure didn't go in your feet. All right, so let me hear this. Let's do this again. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Now keep that momentum. And I want you to, after every line that I sing, I'd cue you, right? And you're all doing well. You could fit in the comeback choir. You're all doing well. Because let me just say this. For the fight that we have ahead of us, it's important that we sing and break walls. It's important that the trumpets are sound to break walls. It's inevitable. It's important that we show up singing as well. Okay? Okay? Yes. Nice. This song's more like this. We're ready for the fight. Paul and Silas, bound in jail, had no money for to go to bail. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Paul and Silas begin to shout. Dungeon chicken chains fell off. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Freedom's name is mighty sweet, and soon we're gonna meet. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. I've got my hand on the gospel plow. Won't take nothing for my journey now. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. The only chain that a man could stand is the chain of hand in hand. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna board that big gray bus. I think it's happening in January, right? The Women's March is gonna happen, right? Yes. So we're gonna board that big gray bus and carry on love from town to town. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Can I tell you what I did was wrong? The only thing I did was wrong was staying in the wilderness too long. Sometimes, you have to wake up, right? The young folks say staying woke. Waking from our sleep and slumber. Some of us are still sleeping in an era that's really divisive, evil, and cruel. So the only thing I did was wrong was staying in the wilderness too long. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. The only thing I did was right was the day we started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Let me just, this last one. We talk about heaven, okay? Ain't been to heaven, but I've been told the streets up there are paved with gold. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Beautiful. Thank you.
Beautiful ladies, beautiful song, changes everything, right? Lifts the spirit. I would like to now bring up to the podium our executive director of Brooklyn for Peace, Tara Curry, and she has been amazing in helping us keep and continue in building this organization. So let's give a warm welcome for Tara.
Hi, thank you so much to everyone who came out tonight on a very cold December night. I hope that you enjoyed this evening, even as half as much as I did. There was very inspirational speeches and a wonderful performance now by Christine and the domestic workers. And I was supposed to be talking tonight about looking forward for Brooklyn for Peace and what we plan to do in the future. But I have to admit that a lot of looking forward seems like looking into the rearview mirror. Some issues that we thought had been put to rest, like the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Nuclear Force Treaty, is now being reconsidered again. This was a treaty negotiated by no one less than Ronald Reagan. Even Ronald Reagan said, yes, the way forward is to have a treaty. Let's stop spending money on weapons, certain kinds of weapons, that it's in everyone's interest to do this. We're not in that situation. We're fighting this battle once again. And there's so many battles on so many fronts that it's very hard to focus, and then we get ping-ponged around from one thing or the other, and we tend to lose focus, and we tend to lose staying power. And Brooklyn for Peace is part of that struggle, and saying that we can't lose focus on international issues, on issues of peace, that there are other important events like immigration, like climate control, but these are all connected to the peace movement, and we're not going to find a solution to these problems unless we also understand and actually act on their connections to foreign policy issues. And Brooklyn for Peace is here. It's a community group. We have Brooklyn in our name. We're not aspiring to be a national organization, although we work frequently with national organizations, but we are the local, the community. We are your neighbors. We are your friends. If we're not already your friends, we can be. We want to be. And we think that everyone here tonight is recognizing that to some degree. And we are facing a change now. When we look around the room, we have to recognize that this is the old guard, and that the peace movement to a large extent is the old guard. And one of the big challenges to the peace movement, to revivify it, is to bring new people, younger people into the movement, to convince them that issues of war and peace, of militarism, underlie so many of the other problems we have. And so I'm here to urge you tonight. I can talk about the new things. I will say briefly the new things that we're doing. In the past year, we're in a new office. We have a new staff member, Emily Clark, and Beck, right there. And I think many of you have met her tonight, and she's done a fabulous job in helping make this evening happen tonight. But all of this takes money to do, as you know. And so here it comes. I know many of us tonight have spent a lot of money to come to this dinner. But I'm here to ask you to tell you that it's going to take more. And to please be generous and to think about how crucial having a local peace organization, community, neighborhood organization is to making issues of peace and economic justice happen. So we have to pay our staff. We have to pay rent. We have to get new computers. We've been using old computers that are running on Windows 2007. We've got to upgrade next year. Seriously. And so we need a commitment to that. And so all of you will see on your tables little blue cards with envelopes. We're asking you to make a commitment, a pledge. Beyond what you paid for dinner tonight, I know that it's a lot of money to ask, but to make a pledge to Brooklyn for Peace for the coming year. So pledge a month's rent, pledge a week's salary for our staff, pledge that you'll help to get us a new laptop computer that will run a newer version of Windows. And so, and if that's too much money, then some kind of pledge. And so I'd ask you all to take that card and fill it out. And if you don't have a check with you tonight, make the pledge. We will come around and collect the cards. But it is really important, if the things that you've seen tonight are things that are important to you, we ask you to please help make it happen. We have a lot of plans for next year. You may have seen the immigrants and refugees are welcome here posters in in vendors' windows and merchants' windows. You know, high school students, New York City high school students are required to do community service, so many hours of community service, and you know, they have to do it, and they're just looking for organizations, and they've called us up, and because they're just looking for hours. And so some of them came in and we said, well, you can help us make campaign buttons, and you've got cups full of campaign buttons on your tables tonight. Many of those were handmade by New York City public school students. But as they come in, then we talk to them about other things, and we talk to them about it's not just the community service hours. It's about doing something really for the community, and we talk about the other things we do. And some of them, for instance, have really gotten involved in these immigrant posters, and they've gone out in their own neighborhoods, which are not the neighborhoods that many of us in this room live in. They're in outer parts of Brooklyn. They go into their neighborhoods, they go into the neighborhoods of their schools, and they are approaching merchants, and they are getting a very good reception, and they're feeling very proud of doing some social justice work. And that's these new kinds of avenues and new ways of approaching different parts of Brooklyn that Brooklyn for Peace wants to do. And so, but to do this, we need a staff person. We need somebody in that office every day who's going to take these calls, who are going to be there when the kids come in, that are going to think of other programs to do. And so I hope that you will think whatever you can pledge tonight, please fill out that card. And we'll be going around, people will be going around with buckets now to collect the pledges. And thank you very much. And if you're not already a member of Brooklyn for Peace, please consider being a member. It's $30. If you can give more, certainly we can use more. But for $30, you can be a member of this organization. One other thing I want to tell you, if you've noticed you've been using plastic plates and plastic utensils tonight, there's a couple reasons for that. One is that it is significantly cheaper. You know, in the past we've had ceramic plates, and but it was significantly cheaper for us to host the same dinner and the same quality food. And so we made that choice because the money we save goes into our programs. And the other is that much of the plastic is actually going to be washed and reused by another nonprofit organization that helps to hold dinners for disadvantaged people. So, you know, all of us aren't so happy about plastic, but we made an informed decision on this, and I just wanted to tell you about that. So thank you all again very much for coming out, and we hope that we'll be seeing you next year in various demonstrations, at our forums, or even just getting our calls, responding to our emails to call our politicians. Thank you all, and good night.
All right, it's dessert time and coffee and tea. Please enjoy, and thank you once again for coming out tonight. Get home safely and have an incredible holiday season.
Separate.